The file hit my chest so hard it made a sound. One of those thick, cream-colored leather-bound folders Arturo always used when he wanted to play God in a boardroom. I hadn't even finished my slide deck, slide 14, if I remember right. Q4 risk projections, our transportation bottleneck along the Eastern Corridor, specifically. I was mid-sentence when he stood, didn't even look at me, just reached across the table with that smug, bored expression and flung the damn thing like a frisbee. It bounced off the edge of my laptop, spun once, and landed right beside my coffee. "You're done here," he said, voice flat. Effective immediately. Next to him, my husband stood with his arms crossed and a look on his face that made my stomach turn. I'd seen that expression before, on men who think loyalty is a commodity, easily bought and discarded. His jaw was tight, but the corners of his mouth twitched, like he'd been waiting for this moment, like he was proud to stand beside Daddy and cut me loose. I didn't move right away, just looked down at the folder, then up at the room of 21 executives. Most wouldn't meet my eyes. A few did: Enzo from procurement, Mireya from ops, Darius from internal audit. All three had once called me quietly at ungodly hours when the Calderon machine started wobbling and the men in charge were too busy playing alpha to notice. So I stood, calm, no flinch, no drama. I picked up the folder, flipped it open like I was browsing a brunch menu, and saw the signature line already highlighted. Arturo's legal team had prepared it all: the resignation letter, the NDA, the release of equity claims. Predated. Voluntary departure. Laughable. I pulled out my phone, took a photo of the contents, slid it back inside, and tucked the folder under my arm. Then I turned to Arturo and said, "Understood." And that was it. No grand speech, no tears, just the sound of my heels tapping against the polished marble as I walked toward the door. One by one, they followed. First Enzo, then Mireya, then Darius. I heard a chair scrape as Lindsay from tech got up, then another, Gabriel from cybersecurity. By the time I reached the hallway, 6 had left their seats. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Hey, real quick before we keep going, if this story has you hooked, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. 97% of people never do, but it seriously helps the team and keeps more stories like this coming your way. All right, back to it. What none of them saw was what happened 2 hours later, back at my apartment. I laid the folder out on the kitchen counter, opened my laptop, and pulled up the internal server logs. Arturo's team had rushed the whole thing, probably thinking I'd slink off into the sunset. But I'd spent nearly 2 decades cleaning up their fires. I knew every system they touched, every folder they half-deleted, every mistake they didn't realize left a trail. There it was, the document version history, the edits, the comments. Ensure she signs today. Arturo doesn't want delay. Reframe language to sound voluntary. Flag equity clauses as non-binding. If she pushes back, stall. And then, the golden line, family-led removal, risk, optics. They'd admitted it themselves. Documented coercion. The exact trigger I needed for Clause 14A of my executive agreement, the hostile separation clause, the one Arturo himself had signed when he insisted I join the family formally years ago to appease shareholders. He never thought it would apply to me, thought his bloodline was bulletproof. He forgot I was the one who drafted the clause in the first place. He also forgot that I never deleted anything. It started with a comment at the Q3 wrap-up dinner, Arturo leaning over his bourbon and muttering to the CFO, "We need fresh legs." I pretended not to hear it. That's the game in families like ours. Strategic deafness. Pretend not to see the knife until it's already between your ribs. Next came the agenda updates. I wasn't on the distribution list anymore, but I'd built the internal comms flow myself. You think I didn't leave a few back doors? Buried under a project folder named Vendor Evaluation 2014 was my little treasure map of admin privileges. That's where I saw it. My role, Chief Operations Officer, listed with a quiet little asterisk next to it. Footnote: subject to leadership review. Interesting. Nobody had mentioned that during the last executive check-in. No performance flags, no concerns on record. And yet, suddenly, the woman who'd personally negotiated 5 of our top logistics contracts and cut $14.2 million in redundancy spend last year was under review. Cute. Then came the dinner. Just us two, our usual place. He ordered my drink for me, gin, 3 olives, splash of tonic, like nothing had changed. Wore the watch I gave him, called me babe twice too many times, and halfway through his steak, he dropped it. You've been working nonstop for almost 2 decades, he said. Maybe it's time you stepped back. Recharge. We could go somewhere. Paris, Iceland. He smiled like it was a gift. I looked at him and saw it. Not a husband making a gentle suggestion. A son delivering his father's ultimatum with a silver spoon. I didn't respond right away, just stirred my drink and nodded like I was actually considering it. That night, when he fell asleep beside me, snoring like a chainsaw with a cold, I got up, opened the fireproof box in my closet, and pulled out my copy of the executive agreement. Clause 14A, third paragraph. In the event of involuntary role termination initiated by familial interest or influence, said termination shall be reclassified as hostile. Full severance, equity maturation, and IP release shall apply, including post-departure non-compete waivers. I had the original version, signed, notarized, with Arturo's shaky, dramatic signature. He always signed like he thought the pen was a sword. They probably figured I'd forgotten, or wouldn't fight family. Or worse, that I needed them more than they needed me. They forgot I was the one who kept their name out of courtrooms and crisis headlines. I was the fixer, the ghost behind the curtain. When a vendor threatened to walk, I flew red-eye and made them stay. When the pipeline burst, I rerouted 32 trucks by hand. They thought they were pushing out some glorified project manager. They were trying to erase the spine of the whole damn machine. You don't suggest a woman step back when she's the one holding the wheel. You don't sideline the engineer of the bridge while you're still driving over it. And you sure as hell don't do it with a smile and a dinner check. The numbers were tight, the projections clean. Q4 risk had dropped 18% year over year, and our vendor churn rate was the lowest in 7 years. I was halfway through explaining the shift in our freight insurance strategy when Arturo interrupted. No warning, no preamble. He stood up slowly, theatrically, like some aging monarch preparing for execution. Then, with a flick of the wrist, he flung the folder across the table like it had insulted him. It slid with a sharp hiss across the polished surface, knocking into my stylus and landing inches from my hand. "You're done here," he said, as if he were announcing the weather. I looked at the folder. Cream-colored leather, gold edges, his favorite kind for delivering ultimatums. I didn't need to open it to know what was inside. Next to him stood my husband, straight-backed, arms crossed, face expressionless except for the smallest twitch of satisfaction pulling at his lip. That same lip I used to kiss before board meetings, that same mouth that told me not 3 days ago, "I've got your back." He didn't blink, didn't flinch, just watched me like he was watching someone else's funeral. I opened the folder, one sheet on top, my resignation, drafted without me, dated today, signature line already highlighted in yellow like I might miss it. Page 2, the NDA. Page 3, waiver of equity claims, IP rights, and severance. So thorough, so efficient, so arrogant. I took out my phone, snapped a photo, made sure the timestamp was visible. Then I looked around the room. 21 executives. Some had the decency to look away. A few kept their eyes locked on me, unsure what to do with the silence. "Understood," I said. That was all. I closed the folder, tucked it under my arm, and calmly unplugged the HDMI cable from my laptop, slid it back into my bag, smoothed my blazer, turned toward the door. No one said a word. But behind me, chairs started to scrape. Enzo from procurement was first. He didn't even look at Arturo, just picked up his notebook and followed me out like we were late for a meeting. Then Mireya, then Darius, then Lindsay. I didn't turn to count, but I heard the clicks of heels, the shuffle of bags being lifted, the exhale of tension as people made their choice. By the time I reached the hallway, 6 had left their seats. By the time I reached the elevator, 9. And when the elevator doors closed, I caught a glimpse of Arturo's face through the glass, his mouth slightly open, as if he'd just realized something wasn't going according to plan. What they'd staged as a clean execution had turned into a quiet mutiny, and I hadn't said a single word. I got home and didn't take off my coat, just dropped my bag on the counter, kicked off my heels, and opened my laptop like a surgeon about to perform an autopsy. The folder was still in my hand. I laid it flat next to my keyboard, cracked the spine open like a prayer book, and reread every page. 3 times. No surprises. At least, not on the surface. Resignation, voluntary. Language, clean, rehearsed. They even used one of my own formatting templates from the legal archive. That was almost cute. What wasn't cute was the metadata. They'd forgotten who wrote half the compliance workflows Calderon Holdings still used. They'd forgotten that I personally trained the doc retention team on audit trail visibility. They'd forgotten I was the one who implemented the version history automation they now relied on. I hadn't. So I logged into the secure doc portal, used my old credentials, still active. My husband must have told IT I was leaving on good terms because no one had revoked my access. Another mistake. I searched the internal shared folder where HR parked exec offboarding docs, file name co-term-smith.julia.144.draft. Draft, not final. Click. Version 1, requested resignation due to evolving leadership direction. Timestamp 1 week prior. Version 3, recommend expedited resignation process. Retain discretion family involvement. Timestamp 3 days before the board meeting. Version 5. Urgent. Family-led removal. Arturo wants clean language. Do not mention conflict. Timestamp. The morning of. And there it was. Version 7. A comment in the margin from legal, tagged to Arturo's executive assistant. Ensure she signs today. Arturo doesn't want delay. I just sat there, staring at the screen. They'd written my victory for me. Clause 14A, hostile separation protocol, hinged on one thing, coercion. Specifically documented interference from family resulting in termination. They'd done it for me. In their own words. Preserved in digital ink. I downloaded everything. Full version trail, screenshots, server access logs, even the comment threads in case they tried to claim it was just internal discussion. I packaged it all into a secure folder, hashed and time-stamped, then copied it to an external drive I hadn't used since the 2020 vendor dispute debacle. By midnight, the drive was tucked into the lining of my luggage. Yes, the same suitcase I used on our last reconciliation vacation. The irony wasn't lost on me. I made a backup copy and emailed it to a lawyer I hadn't spoken to in 4 years. Subject line, trigger, clause 14A. Then I poured myself a glass of wine, sat in the dark, and watched the company calendar refresh in real time. The next day, 6 more people had blocked time off for consultations, and someone removed my name from the executive directory, but not before I printed one last page, the access log. It showed the document was last opened by Arturo's son, my husband, exactly 10 minutes before he stood beside his father and watched them fire me. He didn't just know, he helped write it. The Monday after, I woke up to silence. No 4 a.m. call about a missed shipment in Fresno. No text about customs clearance delays in Rotterdam. Just the soft whir of the fridge and the slow crawl of daylight across the hardwood. And then, my inbox. It started like a drip. Enzo's subject line, consulting? He didn't say hello, just attached a spreadsheet, one I built from scratch back in 2015, and asked if I had bandwidth to review a vendor escalation in Kansas City, said he didn't trust the new liaison, said they didn't get how we triaged. I stared at it for a long moment, not because I didn't know how to respond, but because I knew exactly what was happening. The next one was Mireya. Subject, off record? She didn't even bother with small talk. I'm thinking about leaving. If you're doing something, anything I want in, you don't even have to pay me at first. Just tell me what you're building. By day 3, the dam had broken. 412 emails, all internal, all from Calderon addresses, ops, procurement, logistics, risk, finance, even 2 from their IT director asking if I had the latest architecture notes because the updated schema Arturo's son promised was a catastrophic mess. Legal pinged twice. The first message was stiff. Just confirming if you've executed the attached NDA as required under your severance agreement. I hadn't signed anything. The second message was shorter. Less legalese, more desperation. If you haven't signed the NDA yet, please let us know what accommodations might be necessary. Translation. We're panicking. I hadn't recruited anyone, hadn't reached out, pitched, posted, hinted, or whispered. I didn't have to. People remembered. They remembered who answered emails at 2 a.m. without a tone, who diffused vendor standoffs with 2 phone calls and a 1-page invoice fix, Who knew the warehouse codes by heart? Who carried flash drives in her purse because half the execs didn't understand cloud permissions? They weren't following a title, they were following gravity. One of the newer VPs, nice guy, hadn't been there long, wrote, "They told us you'd taken a step back, that it was your decision, but that doesn't explain why none of the supplier alerts are routing correctly, or why we lost 2 regional carriers in 48 hours. I didn't answer most of them, didn't have to. The message was already spreading. The machine still had a pulse, but the operator was gone. And the people who knew how to keep it humming were slipping out the door, quietly, professionally, some without notice. No press release, no public drama, just the slow, steady leak of competence walking out behind me. The conference room was small, quiet, and smelled faintly of old leather and espresso beans. Exactly like I remembered it. Marcus never changed much. Same framed diploma on the wall, same bowl of mints he never touched. Same habit of listening like he already knew where you were going, but let you drive there anyway. We hadn't talked in years, not because anything went wrong, just the kind of distance that forms when you're too busy fixing other people's emergencies to tend to your own foundations. But I'd kept his number saved under the name Failsafe. He greeted me with a hug and a joke about how I still walked like someone 3 seconds from solving a crisis. Then he sat back, folded his hands, and said, "Tell me everything." So I did. I walked him through the paper toss, the boardroom, the resignation letter, the digital fingerprints they forgot to wipe, the comment history, the coercion in black and white, stamped with dates and names and Arturo's obsession with control. When I finished, I opened my laptop, slid over a flash drive, and said, "This has the screenshots, metadata, export logs, and calendar conflicts. Annotated." He nodded, took the drive, and plugged it in. The moment the first folder opened, he whistled low and leaned in. "They wrote your case for you." "Wait for it," I said. From my bag, I pulled out a sealed envelope. Inside, a notarized copy of an addendum from 2017, one Arturo had insisted on drafting himself, back when investor pressure forced him to formalize my role and offer equity. He wanted it done quickly, before the audit cycle. I remember because he kept complaining about paperwork strangling his vision. Marcus read the clause out loud, slow and deliberate. In the event that the executive is removed, coerced, or forced to resign by action or directive of a family member or bloodline successor, said removal shall be considered a hostile event. All severance, equity vesting, and ownership of intellectual property contributions shall activate as per hostile termination protections outlined in Section 14A. Then the best part. He flipped to the last page, and there it was. Arturo Calderon's signature, slanted, aggressive, almost violent in its ink pressure. Below it, the initials of 3 board members, his loyal lapdogs who probably hadn't read a word but signed to keep the gears moving. Marcus looked at me, blinking slowly. "They signed off on their own noose," he said. "They didn't think I'd keep it," I replied. "Or use it. They didn't think you'd need to." We sat in silence for a moment, letting the weight of it settle. Everything they'd tried to erase, the legacy, the value, the sweat equity, they'd bound legally with their own names. "This isn't a negotiation," Marcus said finally. "This is a notice, and they're going to pay." I smiled, small and sharp. They already started. I didn't write a speech, didn't draft a dramatic letter. Just opened my laptop, clicked compose, and started typing like it was any other morning. To Arturo Calderon, Board Executive Distribution List, CC, General Counsel, HR Lead, Legal Operations. Subject, Reclassification Request, Clause 14A, Enforcement. The body was 2 short paragraphs. The first included a direct excerpt from the notarized addendum they all conveniently forgot existed. The second summarized my grounds: documented coercion by family leadership, forced resignation under duress, breach of non-coercion clause. Then came the attachments: the resignation draft with edit history, internal comment threads from their own legal team flagging family-led removal, the signed clause from 2017, notarized, a 6-second video from the boardroom, Arturo throwing the folder, my husband standing silent beside him, no prior motion, no warning. Last line, under my signature block: please confirm equity vesting and severance activation under involuntary separation terms. I paused before hitting send. not to rethink, just to remember, to feel the weight of every weekend missed, every midnight fire drill, every logistics disaster I'd cleaned up while they played at Dynasty Building. Then I hit send. No dramatic typing indicator, no flurry of legal counterpoints, just silence, for almost 2 hours. Then, at 11:42 a.m., a reply from the Office of General Counsel, 2 words, understood, processing. That was it. No denial, no stall, no negotiation. They knew. They knew that clause was bulletproof. And they knew I'd built the system that stored the bullets. They knew I had the receipts, the signatures, the time-stamped drafts. They knew the optics were radioactive, the legal ground crumbling, and their only play now was compliance. By 2 p.m., my account had been updated in the equity portal. Full vesting, including acceleration clauses. Severance package marked priority disbursement. Non-compete clause marked void due to clause 14A override. At 2:07, someone from HR called. I didn't answer. They left a voicemail that began with, "We're hoping to close this chapter with mutual respect." I deleted it. They don't get to close anything. They just get to watch what opens next. I wasn't there, but I didn't need to be. 2 weeks to the day after the email, after understood processing. The Calderon Holdings Board assembled for an emergency session. The calendar entry just said, leadership stabilization. No agenda circulated, no video link posted for remote attendance. They wanted it quiet, too late for that. By then, 6 team leads had already resigned. Quietly, one by one. No LinkedIn drama, no farewell lunches, just clean departures and fast signature removals from org charts. 3 of them had already signed with me, under Avestra Systems, the banner I'd been building for years. Quietly, in the shadows of Calderon's chaos. It wasn't revenge. It was the natural migration of gravity. Competence recognizes its own. A friend inside the boardroom, someone who hadn't yet chosen sides but would soon, called me later that evening, told me how it went. Arturo opened the meeting like a general rallying troops, trying to reassert dominance with phrases like family legacy and strategic pivots. He looked tired, older, like the act of pretending he still held the reins was finally taking its toll. My husband tried to speak next, started in with some rehearsed lines about organizational cohesion and moving forward. But legal cut them both off. They'd prepared a written statement. Not for me, no, they hadn't contacted me at all, but for the board. The former chief operations officer, it began, is protected under irrevocable contractual clauses ratified by this board and executed by executive authority. Any attempt to interfere with her current or future endeavors will be regarded as retaliatory conduct, exposing this organization to legal and financial liability. Someone apparently asked if I could be compelled to sign a non-solicitation addendum. Legal's answer, no. Someone else floated the idea of rebranding core systems to distance them from my legacy architecture. Legal, she holds original authorship rights on 3 components. Any use beyond what was previously licensed may trigger IP violation. By the end of the meeting, Arturo had stopped speaking. My husband, too. They sat there, both of them, staring down at a reality they thought they'd authored, now slipping out from under their nameplates. The room, I was told, felt hollow. Not angry, not chaotic, just exposed. Because now they knew. It wasn't just that I was gone. It was that their people were following, not out of loyalty, out of logic. No one wants to stay in a sinking ship captained by denial. They weren't chasing me, they were escaping them. And I didn't have to say a word. The filing hit public record on a Thursday morning, buried on page 37 of Calderon Holdings' Q1 earnings report. Tucked between standard disclosures and dry legal footnotes was a single line. Key leadership departure reclassified due to breach of contractual non-coercion clause. No names, no scandal, just a phrase polished by attorneys and passed through enough board approvals to neuter it of emotion. But everyone inside the industry knew what it meant. You don't reclassify a departure unless you're paying for it, and you don't invoke a breach unless someone held the receipts. It didn't trend. There were no headlines, but the right people saw it. At the same time, our launch memo went live. No theatrics. Just a clean landing page with 4 words stretched across the top in charcoal font. Stability, precision, continuity, delivered. Below that, Avestra Systems, founded by Julius Smith, former Chief Operations Officer of Calderon Holdings, launches with a focus on adaptive logistics infrastructure and crisis-proof operational design. Our first client, an $82 million logistics contract previously serviced by Calderon, one they fumbled in the weeks following my exit, after 3 of their primary vendors began requesting amended terms or early termination. Vendors I'd personally stabilized during the pandemic, vendors who now felt safer aligning with me. The Calderon name still had weight, but mine had momentum. A few board members tried to spin it as industry churn during the Q&A portion of their shareholder call, but one analyst asked the question directly: was the departure of the former COO related to operational instability or legal exposure? Arturo deflected, but the CFO's pause was telling. Meanwhile, on my side of the world, my phone buzzed. A text from Marcus, my attorney. "They paid you to build the engine. Now you own the road." I didn't reply. Just looked out the window of our new office space, top floor, overlooking the port where I once spent nights triaging freight delays by flashlight. The irony? I never set out to leave. I would have stayed. Continued cleaning up after their decisions. Kept holding the wheels steady while the men in the family played CEO. But they made the mistake of trying to erase the one person who documented everything. Now, the very clause they rushed to sign, the one they thought I'd never use, had flipped the power dynamic in a single sentence. There were no lawsuits, no screaming matches, no press campaigns, just a quiet shift in current, like water finding its proper course. It was 6 months to the day since the boardroom ambush. I hadn't planned to go to the summit. In fact, I almost skipped it entirely. But something in me, call it curiosity, or the need to see the aftermath with my own eyes, booked the pass, chose the vendor badge over the speaker one, and showed up quietly. I wore black slacks, a charcoal blazer, no logo, no name tag except the minimal one they print at the door. I didn't walk in with fanfare, didn't post about it, just arrived early, took my seat near the back, and watched. The ballroom was filled with familiar faces. Supply chain officers, regional execs, third-party vendors, a few analysts who used to dismiss my process charts as too conservative. Now they quoted them. Panels came and went. I listened, took notes, didn't speak. And then, mid-morning, Arturo walked in. He looked smaller. Not just physically, though the weight loss was visible, but in presence. Like a man who used to own the room, but now had to look around and make sure it still recognized him. His eyes scanned the crowd automatically, the way executives do when they're looking for allies, for power centers, for something to anchor themselves to. They passed right over me, but then they stopped, frozen on the screen listing platinum sponsors for the summit. Line 3, Avestra Systems, platinum partner. I didn't smile, didn't look away. I just watched his throat tighten as he read it again, then turned and found a seat 3 rows back, alone. He didn't speak to anyone, and he didn't speak at all. At lunch, I stepped outside to the terrace, plate in hand, standing near one of the tables that overlooked the harbor. The wind was crisp, the kind of early spring chill that clears your lungs. I was watching a cargo vessel pull in, one of ours, ironically, when I heard footsteps. I knew the rhythm before I turned. My husband. Ex-husband, technically, though the paperwork was still sitting in some lawyer's inbox, delayed by his refusal to sign certain disclosures. He walked up like we were old friends, smiled like none of it had happened. "Hey," he said, like we were at a backyard barbecue. "Didn't expect to see you here." I looked at him, just long enough to register the lines that had deepened around his eyes, the nervous way his hand twitched near his belt loop. Then I nodded, politely, professionally, and walked past him without a word. As I crossed the lobby, 3 executives peeled off from a nearby conversation and fell in step behind me. One from procurement, one from systems, one from analytics. All of them now under the Avestra umbrella. We didn't speak either, we didn't have to, because this wasn't about revenge, it was about momentum. They tried to end my chapter. I just stopped writing in their book.